Welcome to the 500th episode of the Virtual Memories Show. We are still preserving and promoting culture, one weekly conversation at a time. I knew this one was coming. I started planning for it months ago. I even considered quitting after $4.99 just so we wouldn't all have to go through this. But, well, as it turns out, I've already recorded 501 and 502, and yeah, I've committed to the next dozen or so after that. So, let's get this party started. I began the Virtual Memories Show in 2012. I modeled it after Mark Maron's WTF podcast, but instead of conversations with comedians, I was going to focus on writers because, literary guy. To say it grew from there is an understatement. I have recorded with writers, artists, cartoonists, musicians, translators, archivists, publishers, a guy who plays musical accompaniment to silent movies, a million different fields and all these sub niches. And, well, it turned out to be a lot more than I thought it was going to be, and a lot more work than I imagined. But in the process, it changed my life. And I'll go into that during the episode itself. For now, I just want to tell you what you're in for. See, I tried to get some super special Mount Rushmore guest for this one. I struck out with everyone. There's one that started to come through, but we had to delay, and you'll find out about that one if it ever happens. I even, especially struck out with my podfather, Mark Maron. But the thing that occurred to me, and maybe I'm rationalizing, sure, I do that, is that this podcast isn't about necessarily attracting big names. It's about making great conversation. And I've had some names on this show, but that's no guarantee of a great talk. The biggest thing I discovered is that the people I had absolutely no idea what I was in for in terms of their lack of public persona turned out to be the most fruitful and energetic conversations. So instead of making this an episode centered around one super special guest, I asked all of my past guests to send me an audio message for episode 500, because who better to celebrate that anniversary with than the people who helped me reach this milestone? And nearly 100 of them called into my Google Voice number, or they sent audio files. A few of them wrote texts for me to read. And one of them decided to instead send me a set of really groovy watercolor paints. Thanks, Bean. So you are about to be treated to an absolutely incredible array of creative people offering remembrances, congrats, tributes, thanks, jokes, a couple of songs, and all sorts of other ways of talking about how awesome I am, which is both gratifying and embarrassing, I admit. But a lot of these went into me and what they thought of our conversation and the episodes they've listened to after. And, like I say, it's gratifying and embarrassing. I'm going to try and keep the self-deprecation that I'm known for to a minimum this time around, and just kind of bask and enjoy the knowledge that I made this show, that we made this show, we being the gestalt of me as the host, all of these guests, you as the audience and listeners. Because it's a lot of work doing this every single week and rarely taking a week off. And it can be difficult to step back and really appreciate what the Virtual Memories Show is and what it's become over 10 plus years. But making this episode, even though I have to tell you, I am not taking a week off after this. In fact, I might do 2 episodes next week, and then one for the end of August, and then one right after Labor Day. But anyway, the fact that I put this together, the process of doing it, really helped me step back, or gave me a 30,000-foot view or something, however we want to describe it, because it was the guests talking about their experiences and why so many of them keep listening to the show after they've been on. And some of these guests are people whose work I idolized and adored since I was a teenager. And I'm 51 years old now, so that means something. And, I'm going to do a little self-aggrandizement because, I'm the one with the mic here. What struck me listening to all of these pieces, all of these audio submissions people sent, was how many of them talked about my curiosity as to what makes the show special. That is, how curious I was about them in our conversation and in the other conversations they've listened to. And I used to tell prospective guests the show basically consisted of me asking who they are and how they got that way. I think that's true. Don't get me wrong, but I've tried to put it in less anxiety-inducing, more diplomatic tones. But what I want to do and what I try to do every week is learn about someone else's life and their work and their art, their whatever, and I want to share it with listeners. And the other word that comes up a few times in these tributes, whatever you want to call them, is community, where people who've been on the show and listened to it, also they feel like they're part of something. And that means a lot to me because I grew up not in a bad situation by any means, but we'll just say as a misfit, way too smart for my own good, reading comic books when that was not cool in the slightest. I did not have much by way of friends, we're going to put it that way. And later in the episode, you're going to hear a guest goof on my professed friendlessness. And he's right. I exaggerate it because I have made a lot of friends in the past 10 years through this show. And it has enriched my life. And some of them have become very, very close friends. Some of them are just occasional, once a year or so. But it's meant so much to me. And I'm also glad the show introduces people to each other and lets them connect without me necessarily being in the middle. Some of them will reach out to me and say, hey, can you email this person? Because I really liked what they said and I'd love to talk to them. And I'm king of the schmoozers, so I really enjoy making those sorts of connections too for people. And I love that just listening to two other people talk can bring you closer to their world and out of your own. And I don't say it enough, but these conversations, I won't say they keep me sane because a lot of you can attest that's not the case, but they do keep me grounded and they help me through some of my tough times. Just like the email community that I built around this show also. Like when I sent out the big email about my leukemia diagnosis last year, the support and the anecdotes and everything I got from you readers, and some of you are listeners or guests also, whatever, it really, really helped me. You people are my community, all of you guests, listeners, etc. So that's something. That's curiosity, community. Those are the two big terms that come up again and again in these in this episode. But there's another thread that's running through all of this. And it doesn't start with a C, unfortunately. I looked in the thesaurus, couldn't come up with anything. It's legacy. See, while I was collecting all of these wonderful audio tributes over the past month, I realized I wanted to include another set of voices on this great anniversary episode. And that's the guests who have died since we recorded our sessions. And thankfully, there are only 9 of them. It's a pretty amazing track record, given that as many of you know, I tend to interview older guests a lot. But only 9 of them have died in the time since we got together. And you're going to get to hear a clip from each one of them interspersed throughout the episode. And those are Anthea Bell, Harold Bloom, Bruce J. Friedman, Milton Glaser, Clive James, J.D. McClatchy, or Sandy McClatchy, D.G. Myers, Tom Spurgeon, and Ed Ward. And the thing was that listening back to those conversations to figure out, what clips I wanted to put in here, I really got to thinking about legacy and what we leave behind. And I'm so thankful that each of them gave me a little of their time, especially because a couple of them knew the end was within sight. And they spared a little time for me. And when I faced my own potential death last year, when I had my 6 months left to live thing before I got my real diagnosis, one of my big priorities was making sure the archives for the podcast were going to be preserved. Because when I had that moment with the abyss, I lost any doubt that these conversations Going to be the mark that I leave in the world. Okay, last couple things. I did a lot of gabbing just now, so I really tried to keep my interjections to a minimum during the episode itself. I recorded that already. This is coming at the end for me, chronologically. Except there are moments where the guest doesn't introduce themselves, or there's an anecdote that I absolutely have to share, or just because I feel like it, because, again, it's my mic and it's my show. So I apologize. This one's going to go almost 3 hours long. Also, some of the audio is, well, it's up and down because some people called into the Google Voice number from a cell phone, so audio quality's going to vary. I did my best with production. I want to thank everyone. I thank all the people who got us here to 500 shows. I'm going to try not to cry, too. The guests, the listeners, the Patreon patrons, and the other contributors to the cause over the years. All the publishers and publicists, the assistants to the guests. Some of them needed some coordination. They got their own assistants. All the people who helped make the talks possible, I want to thank. I want to thank the 60 or so guests I recorded with for those daily COVID check-in episodes early in the pandemic. I don't count those as part of the 500. It's completely arbitrary. These are my rules, and I'm living with them. But those episodes are really important in a lot of ways. I want to thank the friends who connected me with guests, sometimes without bothering to ask me, which is a little irritating, but it's okay. The people who let me borrow their homes to record podcasts with out-of-town guests. Jesse, you know who you are. Thank you very much, because you have gone over and above in terms of that, in terms of helping me out with having a place to record. I want to thank David Bayerwald for letting me use his music for the podcast bumper for the intro and outro until YouTube accused me of copyright infringement. And I want to thank Hal Mayforth for the music that I now use for the show. I want to thank the spouses or partners of guests who, and there's no easy way to put this, who left the room or otherwise didn't start the laundry or the dishes mid-podcast. I know it was an imposition. I thank you for allowing me to get, an hour or so with your partner. I want to thank the hotel housekeepers who let me stay a while in the room so I could finish recording with a guest during a festival. And I want to thank the festivals that invited me to interview guests and let me use the recording for a show. The doorman who didn't question the guy with the weird bag of all the podcast gear who said he needs to go to floor 12 or whatever. Also the TSA staff who did freak out every time they would run my gear through the scanner. And then there was the one who saw the microphones on the little display and asked if I was a hip hop artist. You in particular, I thank for giving me a little anecdote about, TSA having a sense of humor. I want to thank Mark Maron and his producer, Brendan McDonald, for blazing the trail and giving me something to shoot for. And I want to thank Brendan again for giving me production advice on multiple occasions, right up to a few weeks ago when he filled me in on the microphones I'm going to need to pick up to replace the ones I currently have, which have been discontinued. Anyway, the people who ask me for podcast advice and technical specs, because that makes me understand my own workflow better. The people who read the weekly email and write me about it, as I mentioned during my CLL crisis, you guys meant a lot to me. And I even want to thank the guests whose episodes are never going to air, and you know who you are, and you know why. And anyone else I'm forgetting. And most importantly, I want to thank my wife for putting up with me and all of the travel and all of the inconvenience and all of the weekends and evenings spent doing this. It was a few years in when she referred to herself as a podcast widow as opposed to a football widow or something like that. And it made me feel terrible, which I'm not 100% sure was her intention. But regardless, Amy, I think this has all been worth it. And I love you. And now the virtual memories conversation with just about everybody. Our first guest didn't introduce himself directly, but it's my brother, Boaz Roth. I was hoping to get in a message from one or both of my parents, but it wasn't in the offing.
These days, everyone and his brother has a podcast, but I'm proud to say that my brother had a podcast before everyone got theirs. I'm even prouder to say that he's made it to 500 episodes without one ad for a mattress, a fire pit, hair growth formula, or male enhancement pills, 3 of which I'm in desperate need of. As they say in our tribe, dear brother, Yasher Koach, and here's to the next 500 episodes and beyond.
I owe this next guest a big debt of gratitude, which is why I'm running him second. If it weren't for David Leopold, I never would have gotten past episode 162. It's a long story, but I've told it before. David unknowingly gave me a lifeline and restored my faith in the Virtual Memories Show project, so I will always be indebted to him, or I'll always be blaming him, one or the other.
This is David Leopold, an author and curator and creative director of the Al Hirschfeld Foundation. I was on in 2015 for my book, The Hirschfeld Century. Congratulations, Gill, on show 500. It has been a remarkable journey that you've been on, and I wanted to thank you for allowing us all to eavesdrop on your fascinating conversations with artists, writers, silent film piano players, and more. I'm glad it's been rewarding to the host because it certainly has been to the listener. I'm glad that you have created an oasis in the talk show podcast world where real, in-depth conversations take place, especially on subjects that are rarely touched on. 500's great, but I'm already looking forward to 501 and beyond. Long may you run.
Hi, Gill. This is Dave McKean wishing you a happy 500th podcast. Well, I virtually remember all the anecdotes and stories that your many different guests articulated on your podcast. Now 500 streamings later, it's a pleasure to relive them, to laugh or cry or sympathize or challenge or forgive them. 500 is a lot of shows to prep and a ton of miles your notebooks had to schlep. There's the one about the publisher, I can't recall who told it, but it ended with a book for sale and someone went and bought it. And the one about the artist who was drawing something funny, and the client who sat po-faced said it wasn't worth the money. And Clive James, oh yes, there was Clive James. And the writer who was writing, and the writing wasn't flowing, so he walked out through a storm until his mind had started blowing. One conversation at a time, they all survived. The voices and the stories and James, Clive.
Oh, okay. I thought about saving that one for the very end, but I realized you would never forgive me if you had to wait 2 hours for that piece of magic from Dave McKean. And since Dave and numerous other guests cite my Clive James conversation as their fave, and trust me, anytime anybody asks me, what's your favorite episode of the show, I always just throw Clive James out there. Here's my clip. Here's a clip from my talk with Clive, who died in 2019. The whole story is he had the same leukemia that I now have, as well as emphysema, couldn't travel, immune system was shot. I thought I was never ever going to record with him, but I pitched him at the end of 2014, and he said, well, yeah, sure, you'll have to come out to England because I can't travel, but let's meet up at the end of February. And I did. I flew out to England for 48 hours. I recorded with him and then with his wife and then with the translator, Anthea Bell, who has also died and will be in this episode. And, anyway, sitting down with Clive and having a conversation is one of the high points of my life. So here is a piece of that. There'll be another one later on in the show. The new book that you have out is a collection of your poetry pieces. Well, your pieces about poetry over the last almost 10 years. When this experience began with your health, with the decline, were there poems that in particular, I want to say gave you solace, but Did certain poems come to mean more to you as you started to look at your mortality much more closely?
Most of the poems that did indeed give me solace and continue to do so were already in my head, often from my early years. Back in the late 50s in Australia, that's me, the aspiring literati, were all reading the 30s poets, mainly the English ones, Auden and McNeice, and of course Eliot, Empson, and so on. And we were also reading some Americans, especially E. E. Cummings. I was a big E. E. Cummings fan. I would recite, unbidden, E. E. Cummings poems under the illusory conviction that they would get girls. They don't actually.
It worked for Michael Caine and Hannah and her sisters.
Exactly.
Nobody, not even the rain, has such small hands. But
that line I tried. It doesn't work.
No, I did it in college. Didn't work either.
Nobody wants to have small hands. You notice that? Sounds babyish. But I loved it all, and I got a lot of stuff by memory. And I found when I got really sick in recent years that all that was in my head. And because over the years it had been joined by many other things. I love the English 17th century, starting with Shakespeare's sonnets, and I love Herrick. And Marvell is almost my favourite poet of all. I think Marvell is the most marvellous poet. It makes you wonder whether you would think that if his name had been, say, Andrew Klutz.
Abernathy. Yeah.
But
it works for you.
But his definition of love is probably the perfect poem. I can recite that too, unbidden. Oh. And it all comes in handy as you lie there contemplating the end. The question is why? Why, when your body is about to come apart, is there such an appeal in reading such highly organized argument and imagery? And that's exactly what I set out in some of the later pieces in this new book. That's what I was really setting out to examine. What's going on? Why is intense language so important? Why is the organization of it so important? And perhaps I got a little solemn, but I was able to put a lot of the excitement into the book that I've always found in poetry, because now I really have to examine what I loved about it. The days when I could get away with just taking it all for granted have gone by.
And this next guest is Daryl Pinkney.
I'm interrupting the Dave McKean show on Prompt just to say this in celebration of the 500th podcast, the 500th podcast show. I have to say, or I'm pleased to say, or want to say, I don't know how to start, but the Virtual Memories show I've often found very consoling, especially these past couple of years. To listen to writers and artists talk about their work takes you out of yourself. I learn something. Often I get ideas. I certainly add to my reading list. I find that I'm interested in subjects I didn't know I was interested in, especially in the area of, say, cartoons and graphic novels, something I don't know much about. So The Mormon goes on my reading list. A Swedish graphic novelist went on my reading list. I very much enjoyed the discussions about R. Crumb. I'm of that generation that found him in a friend's dorm room back in the days when every white guy was in a Grateful Dead T-shirt. It seemed to me very much about funkiness in the city. And for my innocence, a real gave me a slight sort of pornographic buzz. Anyway, that was very interesting and very brave. Somewhere Gil Roth told us that he has Albrecht Dürer hair. But he also has a wonderful speaking voice. And the way he talks is at once sort of colloquial and literary. And there have been some mornings when the voices in themselves were just, were enough to kind of repair the day or get something going or take a time out from something that was added to what you were trying to figure out, whatever that was in your own work. I am touched by his weekly reports on his health. Says something about how he thinks of his audience and maybe the trust between host and audience. I don't know. I guess all good wishes.
I think he got cut off at the 3-minute mark for my Google voicemail, but that seems like a pretty good place to get cut off, right? So the next guest is the great cartoonist Sherry Flanagan. And it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it here. While I've become friends with numerous guests over the years, I am not quote-unquote in a relationship with any of them. Just keep that in mind, not just for this segment, but some of the other ones that also might seem suggestive.
Men who read are rare and wonderful. We must treasure and preserve them. Most men don't even read the instructions. They think they already know how to do everything, or they rely on the advice of their buddies, thus perpetuating generations of error-filled life choices. Men who don't read are boring. The only character they can discuss is themselves and maybe their Bitcoin millionaire friend who can't get a bank account. They've seen some movies, but can't compare the film version to the book. They'll claim to be a libertarian because they think Ayn Rand was a really smart guy. On the other hand, men who read books, especially the ones who have read the entire Outlander series, or Persepolis 1 and 2, or everything James Michener wrote, or books I haven't heard of but would really love, those men, they will never lose their studliness. Men who read will always be fascinating and fun, with their minds full of so many more lives than just their own. They are never boring. A man who reads will have something to do when we are in bed, and I am reading a really good book that I can't put down. So I am deeply grateful to the people who write books, authors, historians, researchers, and all those who rewrite their book 36 times until it works and figure out how to get it published and end up with other geniuses and legends talking to Gill Roth on the Virtual Memory Show. Thank you for supporting men who read, an endangered species.
Oh, hello, Gill. This is a message from Celia Paul. Just to say I loved our 2 podcast conversations, and thanks for introducing me to a wider world. And I'm pleased you've engaged with drawing and making art too, and sending you all my best and thanks. Bye for now.
Hi, this is Ars Sikoriak.
And Creota Wilbur.
And we want to congratulate Gill on 500 episodes.
But I don't think 500 episodes are quite enough. So how about 5,000?
Great idea. You can use this in the show if you want.
Sure, we're happy.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Gill. It's Ed Sorrell. I can't say that I've dreamt of being on the Virtual Memories show all my life, but nevertheless, I very much enjoyed doing it. You must be a terrific interviewer because I only studied a little bit. Anyway, good luck on your next 500 episodes. See you.
Hey, okay, who's this one for? Oh, Bill Ross? Bill Ross. Okay. Hey, Bill Ross. Hey, it's Tom Hart here. And I just want to congratulate you on your podcast and how many? On 500 episodes of your podcast. You've done a good job telling the world about books and stuff. So congratulations, and here's the 5,000 more. Wait, 500 more. Thanks, Bill.
I'm glad Tom Hart made sure I don't let my head get too swelled for this episode. The next speaker is Andrew Jameson, with whom I shared an impromptu psychotherapy session a few months ago.
Dear Gill, many congratulations on your upcoming 500th episode of Virtual Memory Show. This is quite a feat, and what a terrific resource this archive of conversations has become. I consider myself to be extremely fortunate that as one of your most recent interviewees, I managed to get under the wire and be included in your first 500 interviews. I do hope you now have your sights on the magnificent achievement of 1,000 interviews. The success of these fascinating conversations is entirely down to your array of fine personal qualities, your natural empathy, both intellectual and emotional intelligence, your breadth of culture and wide boundaries of what you've read, your immense curiosity, and most important of all, your innate modesty. Given this cornucopia of personal gifts, I very much hope you will commit some of your thoughts, ideas, and experiences to paper, as you have so much to share that would be of considerable interest. I also suspect that your love of the written word would reveal a lyrical style that would fall from your pen with elegance and wit. So congratulations on your great achievement. With warmest regards, Andrew Jameson.
Hey Gill, it's Bram Presser calling all the way from Australia to send you much love and muzzles on 500 episodes. What an incredible achievement. Always love listening. Thank you for all you do for us writers, and especially for taking a punt on this kind of wacky Aussie punk who rocked up in your city one day to talk about the Book of Dirt. It was great fun. And anyway, I look forward to hearing another 500 episodes. Make it 1,000. Make it 10,000. Keep it coming. See ya.
Hi, Gill. It's Mort Gerberg. Remember me, the cartoonist for all seasons, from the New Yorker and other genres of communication, which you talked about on your podcast. And I'm calling to say congratulations, Gill, on the occasion of your 500th episode of the Virtual Memories, or as we said in the old neighborhood, Mazel Tov. Since this is a notable moment, it calls for a comment or an opinion. So, like all your other 499 podcast subjects, I've been interviewed by many others besides you, because you all must have thought that what we do is interesting enough to share with other people. But the truth is that the experience for we interviewees can sometimes feel repetitive. You know, been there, done that. So what I'd like to say is that you provided me with one of the best being interviewed experiences I've had. It was so smooth and easy that I hardly felt a thing. I mean, Gill, I'm sure you know that sometimes when a person has to talk about himself, herself, theyself, itself, whatever self, saying the same things, well, it can be boring or dull. And being only an audio interview, there's no opportunity for a visual gimmick. You know, like making faces or out of pencil and drawing Mickey Mouse. But the podcast you did with me, with your easy manner, making me feel as comfortable as being in my own living room, which of course is where you were clever enough to do it, what I felt was genuine curiosity in hearing my own answers to your question. So it turned out to be a really interesting conversation for me, which surprised me. The truth is that I had not really listened to it fully until long after we did it. I don't like to hear myself talk. I've heard it a million times before. But listening to you talk to me, that was interesting. And the surprise was that I learned a lot. So I think that when I get to writing my memoir, if I do, I'll come back for another podcast. And I'll listen closely, and I'm sure I'll learn more about myself to write about. So thanks again for the pleasurable experience, and congratulations again, Mr. 500 Man. Stay well and stay podcasting, and for at least another 500. Best to you, Mort.
Hello, Gill. This is Paul DiFilippo calling on the occasion of your nearly approaching 500th anniversary show. I was honored and thrilled to be a part of Virtual Memories, and it has just been a monumental accomplishment for contemporary listeners and future listeners and posterity in general. You are contributing immensely to the cultural legacy of this era, and I can't thank you enough for doing it. I fully anticipate uttering similar congratulations on the 1,000th show anniversary, and I know that we will soldier on into the future, enjoying life and making the most of the cultural wonders that are around us. And thanks so much. Be well, and we will be hoisting a drink in the future, I am sure, in memory of this and many other happy occasions. Take care. Bye.
Congratulations, Gill, on your forthcoming 500th Virtual Memories show. I was honored to be your guest 5 long years ago, a time when we had no idea we'd be living through a seemingly never-ending pandemic, and when I was still in my old apartment where you interviewed me and met my cats, period. You probably don't realize this, but I'm pretty shy with new people and being interviewed, but you made me feel comfortable immediately. You really are a terrific interviewer. Thank you for having me on your show, and I wish you luck and the strength and the energy and time to continue doing great shows. Thanks, Ellen Datlow.
500 episodes. Wow. 500 ways to consider and reconsider life, art, humor, death, and just the transcendent fun of actually being here and sharing this ongoing and ever-living conversation. Congratulations, Gill, and thank you for inviting me to this party. This is Kathy Koja.
Hey, Gill, this is Maria Alexander, and I'm calling to let you know that first, I'm just super proud of you, dude. This is amazing. 500 episodes. I mean, either I'm proud of you or I'm worried about you. I choose proud. And I'm also proud that you asked me to be part of 2 of those episodes. So that means a lot to me, and your show is amazing. So I hope you have 500 more, and I really, here's to culture, readers, books, stories in general, and to friendship. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Gill. It's John Crowley. This is just to say that over the years, our conversations were not only amicable and generous on both sides, and your openness to what I, as subject, really wanted to talk about and what not. Thanks for all the help you've given to me and all the fun we had talking about it all through those years. Have a ball on your big day. So long.
Okay, our last few speakers were sort of a group around the science fiction and fantasy writer world. There's a couple of the groups of speakers who are going to be sort of thematically connected. But John Crowley, in addition to being part of that world, was also key in helping me get another of my Mount Rushmore guests, Professor Harold Bloom. He was also the one who gave me the best advice going into that session when I asked John and a few of Bloom's other friends and colleagues about strategies for trying to get Bloom out of his regular routine, maybe by asking him about the Yankees or something else. John said, Gill, Harold is Harold. You're just along for the ride. So to that end, here's a little of my podcast with Harold Bloom, who died in 2019. What poems do you think of for yourself in those lines? What poems do you think of as a memorial for Bloom?
3 parts of poems. In fact, I'm writing what will probably be, considering my age and my health, my last book, a very large book called Possessed by Memory, which is about poetry in general and a lifetime spent in reading it and thinking about it and writing about it, and most of all teaching it. and I've chosen 3 epigraphs for it. And well, I hadn't thought of it like that, Gill. I suppose. I mean, in fact, my will says I don't want any memorial service, and I just want this old hulk cremated and the ashes just scattered in some unobtrusive place. But if I had to have a service, and I'm in no position to do anything about it one way or the other.
Certainly.
The 3 epigraphs to this book would do. The first is from the last stanza of Hart Crane's To Brooklyn Bridge. Oh, sleepless as the river under the vaulting the sea, the prairies dreaming, sod, unto us lowliest, sometimes sweep, descend, and of the curve ship lend a myth to God. And the next is by one of my few surviving friends who's a major poet, the noble John Ashbery, from his wonderful poem, Wet Casements. I shall at last see my complete face, reflected not on the water, but on the worn stone floor of my bridge. And finally, a single line from An Ordinary Evening. Actually, it's 2 lines. An Ordinary Evening in New Haven by Wallace Stevens. A figure like Ecclesiast, rugged and luminous, chants in the dark, a text that is an answer, though obscure. And I have made up my mind whether after that I want a prose sentence translated by me from the Hebrew that I've used before. The great Rabbi Tarfon, back in the 2nd century of the Common Era. It is not required of you that you complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. But as I say, I don't want a service. But for some reason that I don't altogether understand, recently, involuntarily, I keep chanting to myself. Wallace Stevens is double vision, really, of Walt Whitman as I interpret it. The first being Tea at the Palots of Hoon, where Walt is identified with the setting sun in all its glory, and then a chant from Like Decorations, where in the very idiom of Walt himself gloriously appears. Not less because in purple I descended the western day through what you called the loneliest air. Not less was I myself. What was the ointment sprinkled on my beard? What were the hymns that buzzed beside my ears? What was the sea whose tide swept through me there? Out of my mind the golden ointment rained, and my ears made the blowing hymns they heard. I was myself the compass of that sea. I was the world in which I walked, and what I saw or heard or felt came not but from myself. And there I found myself more truly and more strange. In the far south, the sun of autumn is passing like Walt Whitman walking along a ruddy shore. He is singing and chanting the things that are part of him, death and day. Nothing is final, he chants. No man shall see the end. His beard is a fire, and his staff is a leaping flame. Thus he is both the American Moses, you see, and the American Aaron. I guess that haunts me as much as anything.
I will admit, there are moments in the podcast over the course of 10 years that give me chills, and that's one of them. Bloom's friends did, in fact, hold a memorial service for him in early 2020, right before the pandemic. And building up to it, they asked if they could include my audio from that Wallace Stevens reading, because I thought that was standard Bloom, even in his late decline. But they said, no, Gill, you got something out of him. And he found the fastball for that bit right there. And well, anyway, I was glad that it was included in the memorial. I was glad to attend it also, given that the world shut down shortly after that. But well, anyway, for our next segment, it's another voice of the dead. This is with the great poet Sandy McClatchy, or J.D. McClatchy, talking about his experience studying with Bloom at Yale. It was right before Sandy's memorial. He died in April 2018. Before Sandy's memorial in New York City, I immediately before met his sisters, and well, they asked how I knew Sandy. I told them about the podcast we'd recorded and how to find it. And they had this moment where they realized, and I realized, that there was an hour and a half of conversation with their dead brother that they'd never heard before, and that they were going to get to hear his voice again and get to hear him. Well, what hit me was the bigger implication of the podcast and what I'm doing here. In this case, I was saving the voices of the dead, you know. I was catching a little piece of them for those who are left and for their loved ones, their students, their readers, the people they never even met. The people who never heard of them, but were going to discover them and have their world opened up. Which, again, you know, the self-importance, whatever. You're listening to 2 hours of people talking about how awesome I am, so I'm not going to be too self-effacing right now. Here's Sandy.
So I did that and in college, and then I switched to English when I got to Yale for graduate school. But I was only there for a year because that was a build-up for the Vietnam War. And the rule then was if you were in your second year of graduate work, you could continue towards the degree that you were after. But if you were in your first year, you were liable to the draft. I had a bad number in the lottery. I scrambled to find a job that would give me a deferment. I taught for 3 years at a small college in Philadelphia. Returned then to Yale to finish up my PhD. And by the time I'd returned, in the years off, I had been suddenly started to read contemporary poetry, which I hadn't paid any attention to before. So that when I got back to Yale, still intent, as I had been at the beginning, to pursue a Renaissance specialization, I took a course with Harold Bloom on American poetry, which went up through Hart Crane, I suppose, in those days. And my eyes were just widened with how spectacular. Why would I study the English Renaissance? Why would I think about Shakespeare when I could read Whitman? And I never looked back. I thought, and then I began to write, on my own. Then, but it was Harold who made me realize for the first time how high the stakes were. That if you're going to do this at all, and if you're going to do it well, you have to take your tasks as seriously as possible. You can't just write. I think I probably wrote, I've always written from childhood on. And I'm sure in those days I wrote in order to give what I had done to my mother, not so that I would be loved more, but so that I would be preferred to my siblings. Oh, isn't little Sandy smart, or isn't he clever? Isn't he that? And that is a motive that many poets still have. Maybe that's part of my makeup now. Aren't I really better than Robert Pinsky or Louise Glück? It's an awful motive, terrible. But it is a kind of drive that you want to be preferred. And it's not a motive that one is proud of.
Hey, Gill. It's Eddie Portnoy. One-time guest, long-time listener. I wanted to congratulate you on your 500th episode. That's a huge achievement. You're doing great work. And I got to say, it's much more interesting to me than biopharma outsourcing. So thanks a lot. Take care.
So I know you think that, Eddie, but keep in mind the biopharma outsourcing stuff did help save the world during the pandemic. So, cut me some slack for having a day job, okay?
Hey, Gill, it's Joe Chardello. Big congratulations on 500 episodes of the podcast. Quite an accomplishment. And I'm very proud to have been part of it 3 times. All the best.
Hi, Gill. This is M.K. Brown. I just want to say congratulations, really, on your amazing adventure. And I hope we meet again. I will think about people I'd like to hear in a podcast. Thanks. So you take care. Bye now.
Gill, hi. Jim Ottaviani here, calling to congratulate you on reaching 500 episodes. Well, I can't say I've read everything and everybody you've featured over the years. You've definitely turned me on to many new books and authors, and every one of your podcasts I've listened to has opened my eyes to something new. So thank you.
Next speaker is Barbara Nessim.
Gill, you were my first podcast. I had no idea what to expect, but holy cow, it was so much fun. Thank you for the experience, and I'll never forget my first time.
This is John Leland, author of Happiness is a Choice You Make, Lessons from a Year Among the Oldest Old. I was on episode 253 of Virtual Memories, so right smack in the middle of this extraordinary 500 episode run. The middle. Maybe you should call it the sweet spot, because I think of the show as a network of connections or associations, which is really what the literary world should be. So being in the middle is pretty sweet. I first heard about Virtual Memories through my friend Ashton Applewhite, who was on not once but twice, episodes 91 and 160. I'm pretty sure I said mostly inane, inarticulate nonsense in my episode, but in our conversation I mentioned that I hadn't read Stefan Zweig's Chess Story, and Gill very kindly sent me a copy. So without doing anything, I was immediately part of a network that included Ashton, Stefan Zweig, me, and Gill Roth. And the network only expanded outward from there. And it keeps growing. Hey, the universe really is expanding. Just remember you heard it here. Bye.
Gill, this is Walter Bernard. Congratulations on your 500th podcast of Virtual Memories. It was a pleasure to speak with you about the days when magazines really mattered. And I was pleased to hear your podcast about Milton on the day after he died in June 2020. Hearing his voice and his thoughts brought back fond memories. It was a fitting tribute. You should still consider his idea of doing a Virtual Memories book. Thanks also for the opportunities to talk about working for these past 50 years with Milton. He'll be remembered as perhaps the greatest graphic designer of the 20th century. And best wishes for continuing on your quest to record the stories of writers, artists, and life in general.
Walter was partners with the great designer Milton Glaser, who died on his birthday in June of 2020. When I recorded with Milton in 2019, he had the idea that I should make a book of the podcast featuring excerpts of my conversations and my photos of the guests and organize it thematically rather than by the individual speaker. And it was an idea of genius. And it's a great one that I'm still afraid to undertake just because of the amount of work and everything that every single author I have interviewed talks about when it comes to book launches getting screwed up and years of their life going in, and then a publicist quits 2 weeks before the book's going to come out. Everything goes awry. And anyway, these are all excuses not to make a book of the podcast. But maybe I'll get it going before episode 1000. In fact, we're going to listen to a little of Milton right now talking about a book of his own. And I will say, even though it was a year and a half before I started drawing, everything he says here absolutely rings with me. It's astonishing how blind I was about so many things that my guests were trying to tell me.
Oh, I'm doing my final book.
Yeah. Never say final, but go on.
I've done a bunch of books.
It's like the Rolling Stones always had their farewell tour, and they kept coming back.
They kept coming back. Well, this may be my farewell tour. I'm doing a book that is dependent on the idea that everything's connected, that the brain knows everything. It knows everything from the dawn of history. It's all in there. The title of the book comes off a poster I did for the school, which is To Dream is Human. And I'm saying that the dreaming and art making are essentially the same activity. You don't know where you're going. Mm-hmm. The dream or making the art provides a path, and that you find your path by beginning. It's quite the opposite of design, where you know where you're going, or you think you do, and you proceed. But in art making and dreaming, the art takes over or the dream takes over. You have no understanding of where the dream is going or where the art is going. Mm-hmm. It's an experience that we all recognize because we feel enlightened and expanded by that experience. And we don't understand it, and we never shall understand it. But the idea of access to parts of the brain that you didn't know existed and memories that you didn't know you had. So I'm showing also the relationship between all forms, between the ability to crosshatch as drawings and how that idea of the diagonals come about in a design later. That what I try to do is show that there are no independent events. And so the book is transparent. It can start at any point. It doesn't have a chronological or linear enter anywhere. And it also is a portal to other things that are online. And that I have an introduction to Morandi, where I write about meeting him. And then I have a talk on Morandi that's available online. And so I refer everybody from the book to electronics. It suddenly occurred to me there's absolutely no reason not to expand the knowledge base by the medium that is our lives now,
that permeates all of us.
Everything else. So, and also because you can't make any books anymore. They all go with a rubbish heap. So you want to make books that basically live forever the way a painting lives forever, and that doesn't get put on a shelf the first time you read it and never looked at again. Mm. That no longer is possible in terms of staying alive. So the book changes depending where you enter and what you read, and there are several points of view simultaneously.
Hey, Gill, it's Hugh Ryan, author of When Brooklyn Was Queer. I was so excited to be on your show, and I'm so happy to congratulate you on the 500th episode, but I'm also still really mad at you. And I can't let this go without publicly airing it, because you taught me that you can be on a podcast, never have your face shown, and still be stylish, still look good. And you know how much work it has been to live up to your example. But I thank you for it anyways, because it has upped my game from sweatpants and T-shirts. I hope today, on this occasion of the 500th episode, you're having the best day of your life. Well, except for when you married your sweetheart. Take care.
Hi, Gill Roth. This is Dan Cafaro with Atticus Books. Eons ago, perhaps it was 6 or 7 years ago, we met at Short Stories Bookstore in Madison, New Jersey, and you interviewed me about some of our Atticus Books titles. Shortly thereafter, I had sold Atticus Books to a fellow New Jerseyan who ended up running the press for the past 5 or so years. So because of my appearance on your show, I nearly went bankrupt. And here I am, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later, and I am now repossessing Atticus Books, and we are reinventing the press. We are creating a bookstore called Atticus Books and Music in Fountain Hills, Arizona. And Gill, it was a pleasure speaking with you that day. I do recall fondly us talking about New Jersey, talking about some music, and I guess all the things that make you unique and your show unique really has to do with the knowledge you have of a vast number of subjects. So I wish you the best. Congratulations on number 500, your episode. I hope you get a really great guest. And thanks for the memories. I'll catch up with you soon. Take care.
Hey, what's up, Gill? It's E.S. Glenn Everett. Just wanted to call and say happy 500th episode. I'm calling from the back of this comic book shop I'm working at now. Just started crawling out of the house after a long bout of depression, I have to say. And a big part of that is during those dark moments I had. I wrote you this in a postcard before, but it's very true. Like, your podcast was a bit of a lighthouse. Although we joked that a lighthouse is where you shouldn't be headed towards, it kind of showed you where not to go. It shows you something. And there wasn't a lot to see. And I was just listening to your podcast. I started from like the first one and just started listening just to hear something savory, to feed my mind other things other than my own depressive thoughts. So, and now I'm out the house. I got myself a job just to stay out the house a little more. And I just discovered Jacques Tardy. And it's funny because a lot of people have told me, oh, your comics look a little like Jacques Tardy. And then actually I hadn't read anything. And now I think I'm on another level of development. So I'm very happy. And like I said, I'm just sitting here on my lunch break in the back of this comic shop, hanging out and just wanting to leave you this message. Anyway, happy 500th episode. All right, man. Peace.
Between us, and you may notice a couple of cuts, I had to edit that one down a little bit because Everett, he gave some rambling personal life anecdotes that I'm not sure he necessarily wanted to include with all of you listeners. All dozen of you. A bunch of the guests sent in text tributes, like email and such, rather than calling in or leaving an audio one. And rather than interspersing them around with the other tributes, I figured you should get them all right now. So on with the show. This first one comes from Jonathan Hyman, a two-time guest, artist, and photographer. He says, Gill, what you have done with virtual memories and the way you have done it is epic and magnificent. Your overall sensibility, willingness to listen, along with cogent questioning during interviews, and the authors you share make virtual memories a precious gem. I admire and respect what you do for me and others with the podcast and its various offshoots like random thoughts, books, and articles to read in that email, and so on. Long live virtual memories. The essayist and literary critic Sven Berkertz, also a two-time guest, says, 500 is certainly a misprint, but 50 is a worthy number too. I remember first meeting you years ago in the dining room at Bennington when David Gates introduced you to the table. I right away formed a favorable impression which, now that we've done 2 90-minute shows, is even more favorable. I admire the breadth and idiosyncrasy of your taste, the preparations you make, and the engaged intensity with which you turn each encounter into a genuine conversation. Both times we talked, I had the feeling, at the end, that we were just getting started. So yes, fondest praises, 50 is not nothing. Artist Anita Kunz is next. She says, huge congratulations on your monumental achievement. This collection of ideas from the most brilliant minds of today will hopefully inspire future generations of creative people and provide a snapshot into what life was like at this extraordinary time. The cartoonist, artist, illustrator Wang Pixin, or Pix, says, congratulations on your 500th episode, Gill. Thank you for doing what you do, putting to record different artists' ideas, processes, the juggling act between life and art, etc., all placed down in these audio files. Thank you for the opportunity to share my work. I will always appreciate that. Here's to many more virtual memories. Next is the artist Glenn Baxter, who was just about forgiven me for making an off-the-cuff, non-condemnatory comment about the painter Gerhard Richter when we met back in 2016. He says, "So glad you made it to 500, having survived an interview with an English exponent of absurdity. Onward now to the 1000th. Cartoonist and archaeologist Glennis Fox says, "I've been honored to be a guest in very early days, talking in a hotel room in Toronto, and I hope to be a guest again in the future after graphic novel 1177 BC comes out in fall 2023. Even more so, I'm grateful for the conversations you've had with guests that I've listened to while I've been working. They lend an intimate insight into their various working methods and attitudes towards art and life. I appreciate your informal way of getting to the depths of conversations. Thank you for continuing this podcast and for allowing me to discover new authors and artists and to hear from familiar ones in new ways." The writer Joan Moran's Dim writes, she wrote, "Thank you for the gift of your podcast. I learned a lot and particularly appreciate you reading my book before the podcast. No small thing. I also like your weekly gossipy notes and their intellectual and artistic bent. Keep up the great work and looking forward to number 1000. The great cartoonist Posey Simmons, one of my all-time favorite guests, writes, "I'm sending this via your least favorite means, for which my apologies, but it comes with many congratulations on 500 episodes of Virtual Memories. 500 episodes which have brightened, cheered, diverted, provoked, sidetracked, and all those despite sports injuries, COVID lockdown, Trump, health shocks, and scary medical stuff. I don't know how you do it, but please keep doing it. A big thank you. Here's to you." The art critic Sebastian Smee wrote, "Gill, you're a wonderful interviewer. That's obvious to everyone who listens. What made our chat even more fun was that I'm an art critic and you're, surprise, an artist. And a good one, too. Yikes, you could have warned me. Next time, let's swap roles. Thanks for having me on." And the great artist R.O. Bleckman writes, "Gill, I finally figured out how to easily remember your 500th anniversary. I just take my age, 91, then the number, 409, add them together, and voila, I get 500. Simplicity itself. Happy 500th anniversary." And the last one I have comes from artist, illustrator, and cartoonist David Small, who I'm hoping to record with again when I head out to Michigan on a quick business trip this fall. David wrote, "I live in southwest rural Michigan, which is to say, I'm culture-starved. I have my work, my books, and a couple of long-distance artist friends whom I call regularly, but it's Gill Roth who is my go-to man for intellectual and artistic enlightenment and stimulation. This is funny because Gill is so self-deprecating, yet he's kept up in conversation with the likes of Clive James and 499 other remarkable people. Eavesdropping on their talks, I've learned so much. Thank you, Gill." Thank you, David, and thanks to everybody who wrote in for this special episode.
Hi, this is Zoe Beloff. I'm calling to congratulate you on your 500th episode. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to congratulating you again when you reach 1,000 episodes. I know you can do it. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, Gill. It's Virginia Postrel calling to congratulate you on the 500th episode of the Virtual Memory Show. It's an amazing achievement. Such a diversity of fascinating voices, such a wide range of subjects, so much reading and conversing. I hope you have had a fantastic time, and I hope you're very proud of what you've shared with the world. Here's to 500 more. All the best.
Greetings from the Philip Roth Personal Library at the Newark Public Library. I'm Nadine Sergeyev, the librarian, and I'm extending a short message of congratulations on your 500th episode. We're glad to have been part of your show. Since the episode aired, we've welcomed researchers from around the globe, met fascinating and inquisitive people, and learned the extent of Roth's reach and the impact he's made on readers in so many countries. Thanks for spreading the word, and thanks for having us. Best wishes in your continued success.
Gill, it's Tom Tomorrow. Congratulations on your 500th podcast. Doing these informed and thoughtful interviews that you do, I don't know how you manage it. Take a victory lap, a day or two, and then get back to work on the next 500. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. All right, Matt, take care.
Hey, Gil. This is Scott Meslow, the author of From Hollywood with Love, The Rise and Fall and Rise Again of the Romantic Comedy, and I'm just calling to say congratulations on 500 episodes. I was only on the show last February, so I'm a relatively recent addition to the library, but I remember being so struck by how thoughtful and enjoyable our conversation was, and so appreciative of the time and focus you put into it. So, you made a fan of me, and here's hoping for at least 500 more episodes.
Gary Clark, Music Human here, sending you some love and congratulations on your 500th episode of the Virtual Memories Show, my favourite podcast, and it has to be said, my absolute favourite interview that I've ever done with anyone was with you, Gill. Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work. Rock on.
I have to admit, that one made me feel really good. Gary is someone whose music I've loved since I was 16, and I wrote him after he sent that message calling him out on it, and he said no, he really feels that way about the talk that we had. Again, the show is full of blessings for me. Now, the next voice you're going to hear is another voice of the dead. It's the rock critic and historian Ed Ward, and I was trying to figure out where to slot Ed in, and, well, Gary's the only music-focused person who's in this episode, so that's why Ed comes in where he does. I recorded with Ed twice for the first 2 volumes of his History of Rock and Roll. He had a million stories, and we talked a lot after the shows, too. So I make no apologies about going a little long with this segment of his, because he could talk and he knew a lot and he'd lived through a lot. But Ed lived alone, and he was found in his apartment a few days after his death, and he wasn't my only guest to suffer that fate. And well, it's just awfully sad to think about. But here's Ed and Iggy Pop. Did you get punk when it was? So did you understand the significance exactly?
Recently, the New Yorker had a portrait of Iggy Pop by Amanda Petrusic, and it quoted my review of the First Stooges album. Said something like, "This is loud and stupid and primitive and everything that your parents warned you about rock and roll." And as usual, when that is quoted, it was shown as a proof that Rolling Stone didn't get it. I mean, this is scripture in the United Kingdom. They say, "Oh, those fat, bloated hippies, man." You know, well, I was not. I was probably fat, but what happened was, I was assigned to review Abbey Road, and I was to get an advanced copy so that I could listen to it several times to write the review. Now, this was supposedly not done, but Rolling Stone pulled some strings, and I got a call from a guy named Jim Peterman in Cincinnati, who said he was driving up with the record to give to me. Jim worked, but he was formerly the keyboardist with the Steve Miller Band, and he'd returned to Cincinnati because he couldn't stand Los Angeles or something, and went to work for this one stop that, and became the regional promo man for Elektra Records in Cincinnati. But he also, you know, the one stop carried Capitol, so they had the Beatles record. So he drove it up, and I was in Yellow Springs in college. And he drove it to my house and handed it off. He said, "Well, as long as I'm here, I should give you the new Elektra release." I said, "Oh, thanks." And so he gave me a whole bunch of them. He says, "Don't listen to this one." And it was a Stooges record, and he defaced the cover with balloons in the mouth going, "Duh," and "I suck," and stitches on Iggy's face and so forth. So naturally, that was the first one I put on, because Rhinoceros, the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble, Ars Nova were probably not going to be very good.
Right.
So So after I listened to Abbey Road, I listened to the Stooges, and I got it.
Yeah.
And I asked if I could review it, but that whole thing about it being primitive and basic and loud and stupid,
It was a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I guess I got punk avant la lettre, as they say. Moreover, when I got to San Francisco and was working for Rolling Stone, there was like a Michigan rock show at some venue. I really don't know even where it was, but I got in because it was Commander Cody, who were friends of mine. And it was Commander Cody and the Flamin' Groovies, who were not from Michigan, but I guess they were the ones who organized the show, and the Stooges. And the Stooges went on first, and Iggy was in top form.
Yeah.
So at the end of the show, I went backstage to see the Cody people and, tell everybody they did a good job. And I ran into Iggy. I said, "Hi, I'm the guy that wrote the review of your album in Rolling Stone." And he goes, "Boys, get over here." And so the band comes up. I thought, well, I'm either going to die or not. Yeah. And he says, he reached out his finger and he says, "You got it. You fucking got it." And so I've always felt that no matter what the Amanda Petrusiches of the world had to say, or the collective British, that between Iggy and me, we know.
Right.
So I'm okay.
Up next is Sarah Lipman.
Gill Roth, you will forever be the one who popped my podcast cherry. Years ago, you drove into Manhattan and set up shop in my parents' dinky rental studio apartment where I was a nervous wreck. Speech, as you know, has always been an issue for me, but you rolled with it. You were gracious and made me feel at ease. I remember us having a wonderful conversation that day, a meaty one filled with laughter, conversations you've enjoyed with so many guests and shared with so many listeners over the years. So I want to wish you a hearty congratulations on this 500th episode. It's a terrific accomplishment and a testament to your discipline, your vision, and your extensive generosity. I wish you 500 more and all the health, happiness, long-distance miles, and wonderful sketches of nature and birds to go with it. Thank you for all that you are and all that you do.
Hi, this is Whitney Matheson, and Gill, I'm just calling to congratulate you on 500 episodes of your podcast. I was so excited to record with you back in, was it 2020? It must have been 2020, because I do think that it was just like maybe a couple weeks later that the world shut down. So I've said this before, and it's true for me too. You were one of my last in-person interactions before all that craziness started. And it was a wonderful conversation. And I look forward to listening to, and with any luck, participating in more conversations to come. Congratulations.
You can't have a Whitney Matheson tribute and not follow up immediately with her studio mate and creative pal, Dean Haspiel. Dino's been a great supporter of the podcast and the source of a bunch of great pod connections for me. He's the person who connected me with Whitney, but also Howard Chaykin, who you're going to hear, Jonathan Ames, Moby, Stoya. I'm waiting for him to hit me up with a few more single name guests too, but anyway, I just love it when people get what I'm doing and help me make the show even better.
This is Dean Haspiel recording on July 17th, 2022. Virtual Memories is like the American Splendor of podcasts, only with Gill Roth cast as Harvey P. Carr, bringing sound to quotidian and creative lives, and humanity to the people who write and draw our books. Celebrating a life of literary curiosity, Gill Roth's Virtual Memories podcast is both conversational and confessional, illuminating the creative process while concurrently indulging in it. It's been my honor and pleasure to pontificate with Gill Roth rather than to him, warts and all. Thank you, Gill, for all the conversations I got to listen to while sitting at my laptop and or drawing table, creating my own stories. And congratulations on 500 podcasts. I look forward to the next 500. Cheers.
Hi, this is Jonathan Ames calling in to help celebrate episode 500 of the Virtual Memory Show. And I just want to say I was honored to be on the show, and I loved visiting you, Gill, at your house and seeing all your books and being up in the woods of New Jersey, very close to where I grew up. And so I was honored to be on and just appreciated how thoughtful you were and the questions you asked. And I just admire what you do with your podcast and your newsletter. Just, I don't know, your mad curiosity and interest and hunger for culture and to talk about culture and to share things that have touched you and interested you and moved you with everyone. So just hats off. I'm not wearing a hat at the moment, but I made a gesture with my hand as if I was taking a hat off. So I take my hat off to you, and I salute you, salute all that you've accomplished with your wonderful show and with your, as I said, your mad and contagious curiosity. Okay. Hope you're well. Bye.
Hey, Gill, it's Howard Chaikin. I'm responding to your urgent request for attention. I'm lucky enough to have been on 2 episodes of Virtual Memories. And in that luck, it means being in the company of truly esteemed people who are so far above my cultural ladder, it's an embarrassment to me to even be present to this. But then again, as I've said more than once, occasionally facetiously, occasionally seriously, I'm always willing to mistake attention for affection. One more time, I'm grateful. Congratulations for closing in on that 500. And, it's tough being you, but you seem to do a pretty good job of it. Hope you're well. Glad to see you this past weekend or 2 weekends back. And we'll see you on campus. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, Gill. This is David Lloyd. I'm just here to respond to your request for requests like this, which is I'm really replying to say that I had a great time talking to you in the Virtual Memories show, and I'm just adding to your archive of satisfied customers in what you're doing. And what else can I say? Keep doing what you're doing, and good luck. I see in your various messages that you're not always as happy and healthy as you should be, but that's life. It's ups and downs. It's a roller coaster, and I just hope you get off it intact. And life is rough, and just keep on doing what you're doing. Energy feeds you. Energy is the life that gives you any kind of future. So keep up the energy. And okay, I think I've said enough. So thank you.
I struggled over where to place this upcoming one also. It's with D.G. Myers, or David Gershom Myers, a literary professor I visited out in Columbus, Ohio. Myers had recurrent prostate cancer and was just told before we got together that he had 24 months to live. It turned out he only had 6 months. He died during the high holidays in 2014. And I thought I was going to put this one around a couple of the professor guests who submitted audio, but since the selection I settled on is about his response to cancer and literature and what supports you. And, well, I just kind of figured it'd fit right after David Lloyd's comments just now.
being Jewish, but also being literary are two of the great solaces in this adventure.
That's what I wonder. Just this morning, I was reading an essay by Jeff Dyer, who had a stroke very recently. He mentioned a passage from Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. We never know when we're going to die, and because of that, we are, at any given moment, immortal. And
that's nice.
Yeah, except when you actually know that, there is a time frame on things. That's what I'm wondering.
It's exactly the opposite.
Really?
Chemo makes me feel like crap.
Yeah.
But I'm a very huggy, touchy father. Mm-hmm. And my kids love to sit on my lap. And they don't care that I'm feeling like crap from chemo.
Yeah.
And that is a wonderful feeling. And I just reread Penelope Fitzgerald's The Bookshop. It doesn't matter that I feel like crap. I got that chance.
Yeah.
There are always those, and I'm trying not to make this sound sentimental. There's a passage in Mark Harris's Bang the Drum Slowly, which is one of the great novels about cancer, in which Henry Wigan realizes that there actually are good things that come out of a diagnosis. And one of the things is that your sense of what there is to value suddenly takes on a different color. Mm-hmm. And so much of the crap of life no longer matters. I've become apolitical. I don't care anymore. It's not worth my time.
Outrage is not in your agenda anymore?
Not anymore. And I used to be very political. I was a commentary writer. Mm-hmm. I got fired over a political piece. But I don't care anymore. I can't share the outrage. I don't have the time for it. And every Shabbos, I thank Hashem for my cancer, because it has focused me on what's good and enabled me to ignore what's not.
Beside the Mark Harris book, have other books or poems?
Well, Peter DeVries' Blood of the Lamb
is,
of course, another one. I actually love Christopher Hitchens' Mortality. It's one of the great tragedies that Hitchens got so little time after his diagnosis.
Oh, people have asked, who would be your dream list of guests, people you'd want to get, and my wife had said, would you have loved to have gotten Hitchens? I would have been terrified, because the slightest verbal mistake, I would have been torn to pieces over.
Maybe I should do that to you.
Yes, and I made plenty, don't get me wrong. Yeah.
No, and that's a wonderful little book. It's too bad that the editor bulked it out with fragments of unfinished essays. It's just a shanda that he would do that. Anatole Broyard died of prostate cancer 18 months after being diagnosed with it, and his wife collected his cancer writings in a book called Intoxicated by My Illness, and that is helpful. It's amazing the number of men who died of prostate cancer and never said a word about it. Walker Percy died of prostate. Walker Percy was castrated, which used to be the treatment for prostate cancer. And I can understand not writing about it, but God, I would kill to have read Walker Percy's reflections on dying of prostate cancer. Now, again, he died at relatively advanced age. I think he was in his 80s or late 70s. But even so, a doctor, and to suffer that. But there are good and bad cancer books. I think I have mentioned one of the things that makes me so angry is that so many books about cancer are written by survivors. And so there's a triumphalist tone to them.
Sure.
And one of the reasons I feel such an obligation to finish Life on Planet Cancer is that I can only think of two other books, Hitchens and Gillian Rose Love's work, written by terminal cancer patients. Most of us who are dying don't take the time to do it.
And aren't you enervated from treatment?
I think it's that, or have a bucket list, or I don't know what.
Because frankly, the level of productivity Hitchens still had while he was undergoing. See, that's what I'm saying. You'd read these reviews in Vanity Fair beyond the essays, and it was just, how are you finding the energy to read and write these things?
I don't know. Because I don't have it.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering if that's particularly,
Hitchens was
He's made of words.
No, I was going to say he was a saint, but of course he would kick me for calling him that. In the obituary I wrote for him, I finished by saying, "To honor him, I will not pray for him," which is, I think, exactly right. But whatever the atheistic equivalent of a saint was, Hitchens was it. Mm-hmm. As much as I disagreed with him. Yeah.
Hi, Gill. Congratulations on your 500th conversation. That's just incredibly exciting. This is Glenn Kurtz, the author of 3 Minutes in Poland and Practicing a Musician's Return to Music. I loved our conversation, and I'm just amazed every time I listen by the breadth and the depth of your curiosity, your attentiveness and sensitivity to the subject matter, and just the sheer energy that you bring to every conversation. So here's to 500 more episodes. I can't wait to hear them. I'm insanely jealous of all the great people that you get to talk to, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to enjoy it vicariously by listening. So once again, congratulations and thank you.
Hello, Gill. It's Paul Gravett here from London, congratulating you on the 500th episode of the Virtual Memory Show. And thank you for actually interviewing me not once but twice, putting up with me rattling on, barely letting you get a word in edgeways. And for also just tremendous thanks for your commitment and enthusiasm that's seen your podcast get to 500 episodes of such quality and variety. Best of luck for the future. I'm sure the next 500 will be even more stunning and surprising, but take it a step at a time. And each one, I know, is something very special to you and to all of your listeners, including me. Best of luck to you, Gill. Bye for now.
Hi, this is Sophia Glock. Congratulations, Gill, on 500 episodes of the Virtual Memories podcast. I love telling people that Virtual Memories is the best comics podcast that's not actually a comics podcast, because of course it's so much more. It's about books and art, and of course, in essence, it's about wonderful conversation. And I've been so honored to be a part of this project. But as a comic book artist, I always really appreciate that you turn your keen literary eye to the medium I call home. Anyways, I'm looking forward to the next 500 episodes, and congratulations again.
Hi, Gill. It's James Sturm, and I'm calling to thank you. I really thank you for caring deeply about ideas, about comics, your thoughtfulness, your great knowledge and appreciation of comics history. When I talk with you, I'm reminded that I'm part of something special, really special, this history of comics and cartooning that I love so well. So congratulations on 500 episodes. That is remarkable. Here's to the next 500. Take care.
Hi, Gill. It's Kevin Heisinger. So congratulations. I thought I would read 500 things I like about... just kidding. I do wonder and struggle to comprehend that number, 500. It really is an amazing accomplishment, and I congratulate you. I learned a lot. I mean, I don't think I listened to everyone, sorry, but I do really appreciate the attention and the interest that those 500 episodes represent, all that work represents. As a writer, as an artist, to attract your attention and intellect, to be part of your amazing collection of guests. It's gratifying. And so, thanks. Congratulations. It's a real accomplishment. And I don't know, you can cut this out, but I hope you have time on the episode or maybe on a future episode to reflect on some stuff. Because after 500 episodes, you must have learned things and had experiences, far beyond what lesser podcasters or beginner podcasters or I suppose we're all sort of pre-podcast potential podcasters. Anyways, I'm wondering what sort of surprises, what things you've learned with 500 episodes, 500 interviews of artists, and etc. What kind of patterns you noticed or wisdom you've learned? Anyways, congratulations again. Best wishes.
Yeah, I always do think about this. I think about what I've learned and both what I've learned in terms of how it's affected me and what I've learned about my guests. The biggest thing I've learned is just how to listen, which I know I'm not doing this episode because I'm doing all the gabbing in between sessions, but learning how to listen to people and to let them open up and to ask the things that they may not even know they have the answer to, and they may not know the answer to, but that sort of unfolds in the process of conversation. Really learning to revel in that and learning to recognize the pauses, I suppose. As far as work goes and what goes into really making art, it's weird. I mean, I've learned a lot about work practice and ethos and the importance of different types of work. And even from Kevin, I learned certain things about note taking that have turned out to be really important. And it's weird. And I've talked about my own drawing ad nauseum in the podcast in the last year and a half. But the one thing is, no one was ever able to convey to me, except maybe Milton Glaser in that segment that I ran earlier, the magic, the thing that happens when you're drawing on the page, when the line is there and when the lines start to come together, and when what the eye sees is translated to the hand. That's something, that stillness, that degree of learning to see. Maybe guests did try to teach me that. Maybe that comes up in the Celia Paul episode too, the first one, before I'd started drawing, because she mentions that the second time we talk. Maybe you were all working on me, trying to get me to understand what it really takes and what you experience in the making of art, whether it's drawing or other forms. I don't know. I've learned a lot. Not all of it is something I can articulate. Oh, I should also note, I decided not to sample out the background sound of Kevin's segment because, I tried it and it made things sound hollow. And I decided I like that summer evening vibe of the crickets or whatever the insects are in the background. I get that every evening when I take the dog out, Bendico, our boy. I just hear this chorus of all the insects in the woods on a summer night, and it just suffuses me with something. Anyway, up next is easily the strangest submission I received. It is from Jim Woodring. He's excused because he is also the most visionary guest I've ever had on the show.
Hi Gill, this is Jim Woodring. At first I thought I would be unable to reply to your request. I saw it as an opportunity to see if I could, at long last, make a tolerable recording of myself saying something for public consumption. But no, I've made many attempts, but my Portnoy machinery simply makes the process an ordeal and the results unbearable. There are other simple everyday things I cannot do, such as writing in cursive, practicing Fricci LGD-let, sketching from nature, memorizing Ohm's law and learning algebra, but my inability to record my own voice is the cripplingest. However, I found this elegant workaround which enables me to join the rest of your admirers in saluting you for carrying on your important work. The Virtual Memories Show is a great repository of cultural and personal lore. Thanks to you, much will not be lost. All the best and continued success. Jim Step Free Snap the handle of the Fruenton chair.
Hey Gill, it's Jennifer Hayden. Congratulations on your 500th episode of the Virtual Memories Show. That's pretty astounding. I can't wait till you reach 1,000. I love being a guest, and I think it's a great podcast. You do an incredible job reading all these books and asking really insightful questions. You asked me a few questions no one else ever asked me, and I appreciated that a lot about my book. I will forever remember you coming to Labyrinth Books in Princeton and recording the podcast live. And Summer Pierre came down with her book, and we had just a great evening of discussion, and you trying to get between us while we cracked each other up, and you tried to keep a lid on things and made it literary. and respectable and intelligent, and you do a great job. So keep it up, man. Enjoy. Bye.
Gill, Woodrow here. My favourite thing that I wrote last year was probably a pun. In my kids' book, Donny Digits, one of the kids just talks in puns all the time. And I read this out at the signing, and everyone went, "Ah!" Which is how you know that it's a good pun. So I'm going to tell it to you now. What kind of fish do you find in a trifle? The answer is a jellyfish. Okay, this doesn't work so well for Americans because you don't eat trifle, or most of you don't. So I'm going to modify it for you. Okay. What kind of fish do you find in a PB&J sandwich? A jellyfish. Okay, this isn't quite so good because the J in PB&J stands for jelly, so we don't really have to work that one out. But it's the best I could do, all right? All right? Stop complaining. Bye for now. Oh, congratulations, by the way.
Hi, Gill. It's Roger Langridge, former guest of the show, wishing you congratulations on reaching 500 years of virtual memories, which is a staggering achievement. It's quite incredible. I just wanted to say well done, and I hope you're around for another 500 years. I really do. All the best.
Hey, Gill, it's Liza Donnelly. Happy 500th show. That's so amazing. You're amazing. And I'm honored to have been one of those 500 a while ago. But just wanted to let you know that I'm very happy for you, and I hope you have 500 more at least. So, cheers to you. Thanks.
Hello, Gill. This is Jonah Kinnickstein calling to congratulate you on your 500th podcast. It has been a pleasure being interviewed by you. Looking forward to another 500 more shows. Jonah Kinnickstein.
Jonah recently reclaimed the title of the oldest guest on the show at the time of recording, coming in at 99 years old a couple of weeks ago.
Hey, Gill, Roth, it's Claudia Young. When I got your email, it prompted me to have a listen to my podcast, and it was just unbelievable, first of all, to hear what I've been up to 7 years ago. And anyway, it was a gift. So thank you for taking the time and for having the curiosity about my life.
Hi, Gill. This is Ken Krimstein here, and congratulating you and all your guests on your 500th podcast. You actually don't look a day over $4.99. Well, that's not really true. You do look a day over $4.99. But in any case, it's great. Congratulations. I discovered the podcast long before I was lucky enough to be on it a couple of times. I remember listening to so many of your talks and interviews with graphic novelists, writers of all kinds, and I felt like I was part of a community that I didn't even know existed somewhere out there in radio land, iPhone land. And, I was trying to think about what I could say. So as I do with my books, I turned to the internet for research. And for some reason, deep in the Alan Lomax files, I saw this just some musical writing, and I'm just going to try and give you a rendition of what I found. I got the podcast blues. My iPhone feeds a misery. I got the podcast blues. Every galump with a mic thinks they're a visionary. But when Gill Roth starts a yakking, I wish my commute was from here to eternity. Well, I don't know. That was written some time ago, but it seemed kind of relevant. But seriously, Gill, thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing it. And somewhere, I do believe that the great Studs Terkel is smiling. And I listen to a lot of Studs, so the only thing I can echo besides congratulations is take it easy, but take it. Keep going.
Hello, Gill. This is your good friend and New Yorkerish cartoonist, Michael Shaw, reporting from my basement in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, congratulating you on your magnificent oeuvre. Yes, I just like saying the word oeuvre. And also the word opus. You have a fine opus. And I think your podcast is just proof that you just can't keep a good guy down on the farm. Thank you.
Hi, Gill. It's Dawn Raffel. Just calling to thank you for interviewing me about the strange case of Dr. Cooney and to congratulate you on your 500th episode. I wish you 500 more. Take care.
Gill, hi, this is J.J. Settlemeyer. Congratulations on your upcoming 500th episode. My chat with you is one of my favorite interviews ever, and I wish you all the luck in the world. So good luck, and talk to you soon. I'll be listening.
Hey, Gill. This is Kyle Cassidy. Congratulations on your 500th show. It's a remarkable podcast and a lot of work that you've done really well. Thank you.
Hey, Gill. It's Ron Hogan, two-time guest on the podcast. And congratulations on the big 500. That is pretty awesome. God, I can remember when you were still back in like the 200s or 300s. So, no, seriously, this is a really awesome accomplishment. You've talked to some amazing people. And I cannot wait to see who you've got lined up for the next 500 episodes. Cheers.
Hi, Gill. It's Warren Woodfin. At the 11th hour, which is rather on brand for me, but congratulations on your 500th episode. Since you and I spoke on the Virtual Memories show, I curated another exhibition, this one at our art museum at Queens College, centered around a collection of late antique textiles from Egypt that the college was given, and pairing them with new works of art by the Brooklyn-based painter Gail Rothschild and the Queens-based transgressive crochet artist, I guess one could call them, Caroline Wells Chandler. So it was kind of a weird, wild, and wonderful mashup of the very old and the very new. Gail has gone on to do an exhibition this summer at the Bode Museum in Berlin, doing huge canvases that enlarge these tiny textile fragments from late antique Egypt. So I'm a bit jealous because I have not gotten to do summer in Berlin in a while. Hope you're doing well. And again, congratulations on the 500th episode of your podcast. Look forward to keeping up with it. Take care.
Hi, Gill. This is Jeffrey Nakawa, and I was calling for your 500th, just to say, it's sometimes, I guess what I would say I remember most and what I'm most grateful about when I think about you, my grateful memory is just someone who, just the kind of shining model of someone who wanted to start and sustain a real conversation. Your personality, it reminds me a little bit of someone who, one of those when you think about your life and all the years one spends, say, in a commuter train or on whatever, walking sidewalks or sitting in a whatever, at a coffee cup, and how rare it is now for someone for strangers to actually break through those strangers on a train kind of conversations. That you're actually sufficiently kind of like where a stranger sufficiently moves you I mean, we had friends in common, but that, everyone has friends in common. And just the way you are, that it was at once, like super, just as a model of for conversation, yeah, we don't know each other, but let's talk about these things that matter a lot to both of us. I mean, deep things, not just the weather, but, the weather too. Anyway, that's all. Thanks, Gill.
Felicitations, Gill. 500. And what an honor. This is Elizabeth Lash Quinn. I am delighted that you wanted to read my book and then even more to talk about it with me. So my interview was just pure pleasure. And listening to your other interviews, the same. And you're seeing your drawings and receiving postcards and just talking by Zoom because of this time of pandemic. All of these things have been just pure blessings. So thank you and congratulations, and hello to all of your wonderful podcast subjects. I feel as though I'm in a rarefied fellowship with you and them. Really, really wonderful work, beautiful work, a contribution, a gift to the world and all of us. So you should be very, very, very happy, I think, as I am for being included. So this is really your entire podcast speaks to the power and beauty of the human voice and the way that the voice communicates so much from our innermost self to others, or it can. And you interviewed me on my most recent book, Ars Vitae, The Art of Living, and it was all about the cultivation of inwardness, but not the inward-looking, selfish, version that we are familiar with, but the much older tradition of inner contemplation as a way to reach a spiritual higher plane that can then allow us to reach out toward others. And the reason why I'm saying that, summarizing a little bit of what we talked about, is that I feel as though that is the basis of our connection. And I was thinking, boy, this is someone I have not really had that much time with, but we had the very in-depth conversation, and it was based on your incredible gift of reading, another kind of a gift that you're giving when you do this, reading my work and taking it seriously and going through it carefully and piecing together all the parts of it and then grasping the whole. And you do this with each and every one of the people that you interview and the works that you are talking about, and it's really dazzling in all these different genres. Just taking the time to get to know what we are doing with our work at a very deep level. So it's a pleasure to think about your work that way and to convey to you how important it is to me to have been able to engage with you and your work as a listener. I've learned so much. You open up worlds. You open up the door to people's studies or studios or workshops, people I never would have a chance to meet myself, but would love to, and I get to, and there's just nothing like doing it through your eyes, hearing your questions. So authentic, so out of the box, not predictable, not cookie cutter, just based on your real human warmth and intellectual curiosity and your own brilliance in your engagement with the world on so many different levels. So thank you for all of your work. Happy 500th episode. I hope it's not presumptuous to call you my dear sweet friend, because the song that comes to my mind when I think of this celebration and I think of you is Bob Dylan's I'll Remember You. I think it's a beautiful song.
This is Charles Blackstone. Gill Roth, 500 episodes. It's a superhuman feat, but unsurprising since you're a superhuman host. You started podcasting when relatively few people knew what the term meant, building the plane as you flew it, or as you recorded it. The show got my attention early on because of the way you talk about books and the people who write them and the people who read them. I can only describe it as trenchant. I feel like it had been years that we were going back and forth about meeting up. I had always imagined you to be a European with a charming accent, Dutch or something. Had you been going to Amsterdam, coming from Amsterdam, who remembers? But then I had Vintage Attraction coming out, and we finally managed to get a room, as it were. I'll never forget our conversation that ebbed and flowed and bobbed and weaved and herked and jerked like it had an inflatable pilot at the helm. And then I almost forgot we got to do a little segment on something. Did it ever air? Recorded live at the Upper West Side Barnes & Noble on 82nd and Broadway. Philip Roth may have been at the next table. You always have recording equipment with you, don't you? It means a lot to me that you've thought enough of my work to want to share it with your audiences. I owe you a knish for that and always will. Anyway, I hope the next 500 episodes of Virtual Memories are as full of insight and life and love and heart and wit as the last. I also hope to have another novel to talk about with you in the next year or 2 or 10. Take care. Much love. Talk to you soon.
I'm embarrassed to say that the thing that we recorded in the Upper West Side Barnes & Noble, the gain was turned down on the mini recorder I was using, and so I didn't actually get any usable audio. But Charles and I will get together some other time, and you know, I will be better prepared.
Hello, Gill. This is Josh Allen Friedman, responding to 2 messages that I got from you, asking for some comment on your 500th broadcast. 500 of anything is a huge number. So congratulations on that. The people I'd like to hear you interview in the future are all dead. There's nobody alive who I want to hear interviewed anymore. However, you were one of the few to have all of my family, most of my family on your show. Very few media personalities have done that. That would be Kip Friedman, Drew Friedman, our father, Bruce J. Friedman, and me, Josh Allen Friedman. So thank you for that very much, and I will talk to you hopefully before your 1000th show.
Hey, Gill. Congratulations on reaching your 500th episode of the Virtual Memory Show. And to think the Friedman family were featured on 4 of those episodes must be some kind of record. Here's wishing you continued success and another 500 episodes, or the proverbial 120 years, or whichever comes first. Thanks.
Now, I didn't get a comment from their brother, Drew Friedman, although Drew was the first of the 3 Friedman sons I'd recorded with. But each of them, from Drew, then to Kip, then to Josh Allen, got me closer to their dad, Bruce J. Friedman, who was another one of my Pantheon-level guys. I recorded with Bruce in 2014, and you're about to hear a segment from that. Bruce J. Friedman died in June of 2020, and I got the news from Kip while we were recording a COVID check-in episode. Literally, while the mics were on, he told me that morning he'd gotten the news that his dad had died, and you can hear the air just collapse out of me. I decided to leave that moment in the episode, that shock and sadness, because it was real, because it's all part of the conversation, and because Bruce's work has meant a lot to me over the years. Anyway, here's Bruce J. Friedman, one of my all-time Mount Rushmore Pantheon-level guests. Do you worry about literary reputation like that at all?
Do I?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. Someone asked me that question. I don't know why it came up. Seems to me there are two kinds of writers. There's one kind who worry about their legacy. I can tell you who they are.
Feel free.
And others who don't.
Yeah.
You know? I think Norman would be somebody who'd worry about his legacy. Erwin Shaw, I was friendly with him. I liked his work a lot. We had the same publisher in his last days, Donald Fine. And Donald told me that Erwin, as he was dying, was searching around for honors. He wanted honors. Why does he want honors? I said, but he does. He's looking, he's trying to organize honors for himself. Seemed absurd.
Yeah.
That kind of thing is... and I think there are certain writers who worry about that. Mario Puzo, Joe Heller, they certainly would never verbalize that, They felt secure in their own work, and if it lasts, it'll, last. But no, I don't think much about that. What I think about is trying to finish a fucking story that I'm working on now.
I will let you get back to it.
Hey, Gill. It's Glenn Head here. Yeah, congratulations on the 500 episodes. Sorry it took a little while to make this call to you. But, yeah, I mean, I've said it before. Your podcast is terrific. And I don't just say that. I mean it, because I dealt with a lot of this kind of stuff. Not this kind of stuff, because your podcast is its own thing, but I did a lot of stuff to try to get my last book out, and yours was definitely the best in terms of interviews and questions and everything about it. So I just wanted to put that across to you. It was a completely different animal trying to put a book out when COVID hit, and the only way to do it was through some kind of virtual something or other. And, yeah, so it was definitely the best thing I could have hoped for being on your show. I really hope to do it again. And, yeah, I mean, any interview I've ever heard there has been really well thought out and totally integrated into that time that you allot for each person. And so that's about it, man. I wish you the best, and I'm going to continue listening, and that's it. I'll talk to you soon, I hope. Okay. Thanks, Gill. Bye.
Gill. Peter Cooper, cartoonist here. So hard to believe you've been doing this for 500 years. You don't look a day over 40. And the weird part is, I think 498 of those were interviews with me. So all I can say is, here's to the next 500 years. I believe that's a Jewish saying. And Mazel Tov.
Before we hear from some of the translators and publishers of translation, here's a piece from my 2015 session with the great translator Anthea Bell, who died in 2018. Anthea was a late addition, honestly, because I was going to fly to England, record with Clive James, record with Prue Shaw. Figured, okay, that's two really good ones. I'll come home. But they're both at Cambridge. I noticed that Anthea was also in the Cambridge area, and so I pitched her because I've read so many of her translations of German and French literature over the years, and she was up for it. I had no idea what to expect, and listening back to our session to get a clip for this one, it was an absolute joy. I'd forgotten just how giddy, in a sense, she was, and I'm sorry that she's gone. I've corresponded with one of her sons over the years, and he knows how much regard she was held in and how special his mother was. Anyway, here's Anthea Bell. Are there schisms within translating world? Are there schools of thought within how you do this?
Well, there are schisms in translation theory, let's put it that way.
Yeah. What do they consist?
The modern theory is that the translator's presence should be obvious, and I am an unreformed, invisible translator by instinct. I don't want it to be obvious that I have any input. I want the book to show through. I want to get into the author's mind. And I was once asked to give the opening address at a seminar in Oxford about the dawn of the age of the visible translator, and I said, I can't do this, I don't agree with it. And they said, well, come and give an address all the same, so I did. And we all agreed, those of us who were practicing translators, that theory here, theory there. A good translator can produce a good translation. Translation theory is probably a lot of fun if you're doing it. But I will say, and I've just been writing a piece to go on the internet about this, somebody asked me to, I cannot go along with ideas such as were once put to me. I was lecturing to a bunch of students who were doing an MA in literary translation, and somebody had told them to think of translation as an act of violence perpetrated on a book. Don't you feel, they said, that you're kind of raping a book when you translate it? I was with Melissa Alfane, the founder of wonderful Pushkin Press, which devotes itself largely to translations. She was astonished. She'd never heard this mad theory before. But
literary theory in general tries to it always edges towards those weird, gender transgression, anger things.
And the next question was, do foreign writers want to be translated into English? And the answer was, you bet they do.
Yeah, no, I don't want another market to join.
Exactly. And if they can get, considering that very few books are translated into English compared to the vast number translated out of English, and so any foreign author would love to get a toehold in the huge English language market, which of course is not just British, not just American. It's the Antipodes, there's South Africa, it's all over the place.
Hello, Gill. This is Philip Bain calling to say felicitaciones desde Texas. Congratulations on your quincentenary. And many, many thanks for your lively interest in translation. Here I'm raising a glass to you. You'll hear it clink. Thanks again, and congratulations.
Gill Roth, Virtual Memories Podcast. This is Alta Lynn Price. I want to congratulate you on your 500th episode. When I see the number 500, I think about how I switch out my running shoes every 500 miles. I know you're a runner, so I will be thinking of you next time I switch out my shoes, which is coming up as I train for my next marathon. I wanted to thank you for perpetually having fascinating guests and such different topics and great conversations. I am thoroughly enjoying being your pen pal with this daily postcard project, and I know a bunch of other people are delighted by what you pop into their mailboxes. So keep up the fabulous work. There was something else I wanted to thank you for. Oh, yes. For being such a stalwart promoter and supporter of Festival Neue Literatur. Tess and I are really hoping to have another edition with your involvement. But, I remember you moderating one of the Festival Neue Literatur panels before I was even involved with the festival. So it's just been really nice to get to know you through German language literature, German literature translated into English, and to follow all of your interests through your guests. So congrats again on 500, and we'll speak soon. Bye.
Hi, Gill. This is Barbara from New Directions. I'm calling to say, I should say it 500 times, congratulations for 500 virtual memory shows. I had so much fun talking to you. And I was listening, since I have no memory, I was listening to our little conversation. And what I really am struck by is what a cheerful, happy, despite, a little cynicism, but your benign asides in the conversation made me really happy. When I was talking about a famous Brazilian writer, Raduan Nassar, who I said, you had quit writing after being really famous, well, now he's a rancher. You snap back, better than being a lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry. So I had a good laugh. So keep going, and congratulations, Gill. Thanks a lot. Bye.
This next guest is Wallace Willie Minozzi, the great writer and Italian translator, and another person that it has been such a gift to get to know through the podcast. We've recorded 3 times now, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I'm just looking forward to catching up with her. She splits her time between Italy and New York, and she's again a special. They're all special. I love the people I've gotten to know through the show.
Hi, Gill. This is to thank you and to celebrate your 500th broadcast. In an age when everything is measured and there's statistics and it all adds up to money, your contribution to culture, your enthusiasm in sharing ideas, your humor, your sense of irony, your commitment are all things that have added much to our literary and cultural lives. You built a mountain out of all these broadcasts, and you built the mountain on a desert in some ways, and it now exists, and we can refer to it also because you've left and built archives, so we can tune in to things we've missed or go back to things we really enjoy. You have a beautiful voice. It's a great voice in terms of questioning, in terms of subtlety, empathy. You're a listener. You have curiosity. And as authors who've benefited from our interviews with you, and as listeners who've gained from listening to other people you brought to our attention, we can only say thanks for your imagination, for your dreams, for your constancy, for your willingness to be a volunteer. And we just wish you the best for the next 500 broadcasts, and a big, big hug.
Gill, this is Mike Gerber from the American Bystander calling to congratulate you on 500 episodes of your wonderful podcast. And also to let you know that in the month that since you've been here visiting me in Santa Monica, I've gotten COVID not once but twice. So I have to say, I'd like to think that you didn't bring that on. I'd like to think that you, in fact, held it off. Best wishes, and here's to 100,000 million more.
Congratulations, Gill, and thanks for your continued support of the arts. I was one of you first, and you were gentle. I know it was good for you, too, because you invited me back. You even inspired me to start my own podcast, which others blame you for. Miss you and hope you continue documenting our generation's most important artists.
And that was Bob Eckstein, the cartoonist and humorist. In fact, in addition to Bob, a few of my other guests have also launched their own podcasts since being on the show. Not all of them were inspired to do that because of me, but the next few guests are all in that same boat.
Hi, Gill and listeners. My name is David Carr, and I'm a professor of Hebrew Bible at Union Theological Seminary in New York. I'm also the author of Holy Resilience, The Bible's Traumatic Origins, which is published by Yale University Press. And partly following Gill's example, I started a podcast called The Bible, Let's Read It Differently, which has a few episodes and is available on various platforms. So Gill, I'm thinking back to our conversation, which was basically almost 6 years ago, on September 4th, 2016, on a beautiful fall day at my house in Putnam Valley. We were discussing my book, Holy Resilience, and what I'd learned in writing the book about the Bible and resilience and trauma as I recovered from a near fatal bike accident a number of years before. When we had our conversation, there was a lot of trauma to go around already in 2016, and there's always been trauma in human life. That's part of what I argue makes a trauma-forged text like the Bible so compelling to people. People can kind of sense that deeper music running through the text. That said, as I think back, I don't think you or I anticipated quite how much trauma the next 6 years would hold. This conversation happened a couple of months before Donald Trump was elected president. It occurred before the COVID pandemic and before a whole set of other traumas, such as increasing wildfires, heat waves, and other signs of the accelerating climate crisis. And then I think back to a follow-up conversation that we had in April 2020, early in the COVID lockdown. You were having these conversations with various earlier guests, and it was too early then to get a clear fix on the diverse dimensions of COVID trauma. But I remember mentioning then how the flash fascination of many people with the Tiger King television series during that lockdown was a perfect example of how people indirectly process traumatic experience, that they're not ready to fully encounter directly. In this case, people were journeying through an unprecedented lockdown and watched a TV series that focused on captive big cats and the story behind their imprisoned owner, Joe Exotic. So everyone in the series was locked down, much as we viewers were. I really enjoyed our conversations, and I've enjoyed listening to the podcast too. Congratulations on making it to 1,500 episodes, covering such diverse topics. You got on the podcast wagon before many others, and I so appreciate how you share your intellectual curiosity with others. Best wishes, Mazel Tov, Gill, as you move forward to many more such conversations.
Congratulations, Gill. What an accomplishment. 500 episodes. That's incredible. That is so much work. You're so dedicated, and you've created such a wonderful community of different thinkers and writers, and it's just really wonderful to see. This is Vanessa Sinclair. I was episode 217, and I believe that was back in 2017, and you came to my office in New York. I'm a psychoanalyst, and I loved that when I was telling you about what I was doing and the group that I am with and the events we were having. You said you loved the idea that there was this like rogue group of psychoanalysts running around town. And we're still doing it, but now it's more international because now I live in Sweden. And now I have my own podcast, Rendering Unconscious Podcast. And I would love to have you as a guest on my podcast so that you can talk about all the wonderful work you've been doing. It's really amazing and inspiring. And again, congratulations.
This is Dmitry Samarov. I first came on the Virtual Memory Show with Gill in 2014 and have since come to be a regular listener and a repeat guest. I value Gill's curiosity, his thoroughness, and it's just refreshing for a writer to have an interviewer who's read their books, for Christ's sakes. I congratulate him on his 500th episode and look forward to the next 500.
Dimitri's been on the show more than any other guest, I believe. I think it's about 5 or 6 times now, and we are, in fact, thinking of getting together for another one this fall.
Hey, Gill, Scott Edelman here, calling to congratulate you on hitting your 500th episode. You already know how much I enjoy your conversations and how my own podcast wouldn't even exist without your inspiration and advice, so I'm not going to go on about any of that, though I could. What I do want to say about this historic landmark has to do with a phrase I think I have heard you say more than anything else over the years, the thing I think I've heard you reveal to your guests more than anything else. You know what I'm talking about, or maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll give you a moment to see if you can remember before I drop that answer on you. Okay? Ready for it? It's the sentence, I do this because I have no friends. There have been variations to that, I think, like I do this because I have no life, as well as other nouns you supposedly have none of. Maybe you're just joking, or maybe you're just exaggerating for effect, but on the off chance you're sincere when you share sentiments like that you actually believe those words, I want you to know something, buddy. You've got friends, you have a life, and we're all grateful you are in this world with us. So the next time you're tempted to belittle yourself, just know that we know, that you know, that we know that you know, we don't buy it. And if you don't believe me, I guess I'll have to tell you the same thing all over again when you hit episode 1000. Congratulations, Gill.
Scott's podcast, Eating the Fantastic, has been the longest-lived show of any that has purportedly been inspired by my Virtual Memories show. And I appreciate his message, even though I have astonishingly low self-esteem, which is surprising because I'm a raging egomaniac. But I do tend to believe that most of my guests forget who I am the moment I leave the room or end the remote podcast session. And And I have to say, this episode has really beat me over the head about how wrong I am. A lot of people who I did not think remembered anything about our conversation wrote back some really, really kind words. So thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody else. And now we'll get back to my raging egomania.
Greetings, Gill and Virtual Memories listeners. I'm Ian Kelly, longtime pal of Gill's and Season 3, Episode 12 guest. I met Gill while we were studying at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland in the 90s. I often think to myself how lucky I am to be friends with him and that he does this show. My chat with him was a twofer tacked on to an amazing conversation he had with Ava Braun. She was dean of the Annapolis campus when we were there, and I had the incredible privilege of having her as a senior essay advisor. Our chat was good, an opportunity to take stock of the intersection of intellectual and work life, as I think we ought to do from time to time. I can't keep up with the podcast, but I enjoy every episode I listen to, thanks to Gill's boundless curiosity and knack for leading a good conversation. I always learn something, and I usually get some laughs in. It helps me explore parts of the world I would otherwise have little access to and makes life more interesting. I can't believe it's already been 500 episodes and hope there will be at least 500 more. Gill once referred to Derek Jeter as the Henry Rollins of baseball. I say Gill is the Henry Rollins of podcasting. I can't believe how much work he puts into finding guests, and his preparation is on another level entirely. It is certainly all for a great cause, and we are all better for it. Thanks for the opportunity to contribute.
Okay, so actually it was John Rocker, not Derek Jeter. But, you know, it's understandable. Ian's not a baseball guy. So he'd slip that up. And Rocker's an obscure figure nowadays. This all came about because of a really weird conversation I had with a jacked up, roided up relief pitcher at Newark Airport the morning after he'd been traded. This is the story. And I have not told a lot of anecdotes in this one, so forgive me for going nuts here. But it was the middle of 2001, and I was on my way to a trade show on the West Coast. And I noticed John on the platform for the air train, the monorail at Newark. We stopped at a pickup, and this guy who was clearly John Rocker holding an Atlanta Braves, bag, an athletic bag, was standing there. He gets on the car behind me. I knew he'd been traded to Cleveland the night before, so he must have been headed to their next game, which I think was Kansas City. But we got off on the same platform. So I walked up to him, and I said, I heard you got transferred. Good luck at the new office. And he laughed because he was in enemy territory. Yankee fans and Met fans both hate him. So, looking back, it was not the smartest move to go up to a guy who's known for, flying into a rage on the baseball mound and, goofing. But again, he laughed. So I told him I wished him luck, but also that I was a Yankees fan, so I wasn't wishing him too much luck. He said he'd take it easy on us if we met in the playoffs, and that made me laugh. But then I said to him, I read this article about you a few years ago when all this controversy was going on, because he said some pretty not good things about New York City and gay people and other minorities, we'll just say. And the article mentioned that you read a lot when you were growing up and in the minors. Do you still get much reading in? I know I'm a complete nerd, but you could see where the podcast, this is 2001. This is 10 years before I started the show, but you can see where it's coming from. And he said to me, I really don't get to read as much in the big leagues, but, with all the travel that we do. But lately, I've been going back to Edgar Allan Poe's poems and his novel about Arthur Gordon Pym, at which point my brain just exploded. I was just like, okay, I was thinking something very different. But then he said, the other guy I'm reading, and it's weird because people don't think of him as a poet, is Henry Rollins. And for those of you who don't know, Henry Rollins was the really jacked up lead singer for Black Flag. And he went off to go solo and created a publishing house and did poetry and spoken word stuff. And I said, that weirdly makes a lot of sense, John. I mean, he is this jacked up poet. I didn't want to say roided up in front of the guy. I said jacked up poet. And you're this, this jacked up relief pitcher who's kind of changing the way people see that role. And he laughed and said, yeah, it makes sense. So anyway, that is the John Rocker, Henry Rollins story. Again, about a decade before I got serious about interviewing people, I would have pitched him at the time to record something next time he was going to be in New York area, but never happened. And here we are.
Hi, Gill. This is Jen Silverman. I just wanted to say congrats on episode 500 of the Virtual Memories show. Some of the locations where I've listened to your podcast include the Tokyo subway, Paris balcony, New York City roof during the heat wave, the New York City subway, of course, driving upstate, cooking, doing the dishes, doing the laundry, folding the laundry, cleaning mouse poop off a basement floor, and a whole host of other ways this podcast has followed me throughout my days and nights. So thank you for bringing strange and fascinating stories and perspectives into my life, and a big congrats to all of the guests who have participated in the past 499 episodes.
Up next is Aaron Finkelstein, one of my closest pals who interviewed me at the end of 2021, which was so well received we're thinking of making it an annual year-end episode.
I'm really lucky because I have one thing that your big phenomenal roster of guests doesn't have. I knew you when. That is to say, I knew you in the early 90s. For those of you who don't know, Act 1 of our friendship was this long evening on Gill's porch discussing books and music and comics and movies. And we have been able to continue that conversation ever since. Although, I mean, it would take us a little while to get to the life part. But this means that I'm keenly aware of where this whole achievement begins, Gill. I mean, I get to have the appreciation of how far you've come, and I get to see how you've built upon the germinal aspirations that smarty pants kids like us inevitably have. And I have to say, it's amazing to see someone grow into their gifts. Speaking as your friend, I mean, it does my heart good to know the purpose and the satisfaction that this work has brought you. I hope others find it as inspiring as I do to see, and I hope they share my gratitude for having been a part of it. I think what I'm really trying to say is that, yes, 500 is a heck of a big number. But, you know, I've been a fan of the show for like the 10,000 episodes before that. So,
hi, Gill. It's Michael Tisserand calling to wish you a very happy anniversary. I can't believe it's been 500 years since you've been doing the show. Wait. Let me check my notes. Oh, wait. 500 episodes. I'm sorry, but that's impressive too, Gill. Congratulations. I have not been doing too much writing lately that I can speak of, as my time has been spent moving. We've relocated from George Harriman's hometown to Cliff Sturrett's hometown. In layman terms, we relocated from New Orleans to Alexandria, Minnesota, for some family reasons. But I do have some fun comics-oriented projects coming up in the near future I look forward to talking with you about. But even more than that, I look forward to listening to your conversations. Many, many, many more of them. 500 years worth, I hope. Congratulations, Gill.
Hi, Gill. This is Mary Fleener. I am calling on Friday, August 5th, 2022 at 2:33 p.m. California time. Anyway, I want to congratulate you on your 500th episode of the Virtual Memory Show. Quite an accomplishment to talk to all these artists and suffering artists and writers that live in their little hermit caves, and we sit here and it's like we're traveling the world in a sailboat all by ourselves, and then we meet you on a raft and then we have a nice conversation on a desert island somewhere. And anyway, it was great when you came down here in 2014, drove all the way here from LA, and I enjoyed our chat. I was sort of coming out of my slump when you came here, and I was kind of getting back into the comic saddle after spending a few years just playing music and doing local things for local papers. Lots changed in 8 years, and in every way. So I just want to say thank you again, and it was great to meet you. It was great to see you in Columbus, Ohio, too, in 2019. That was a real treat to go to the Comics Crossroads event. That was really great. And anyway, good luck in the upcoming talks. I've certainly enjoyed all of them. It's been really fascinating to hear my colleagues and my fellow cartoonists talk about how they work and their process, and every once in a while you get a dirty little secret, which is always fun. So take care, and hopefully we shall meet up someday soon. Goodbye.
Hey, Gill, this is Patrick McDonald congratulating you on your 500th episode. And I was honored to be one of those. And, boy, you brought a lot of good energy to this world, and here's the 500 more. Thanks again.
Now, my closest friend, Tom Spurgeon, died unexpectedly in November of 2019. And I've talked about him before on the show, and I've run his memorial service in Columbus, as well as the one, well, I actually have the tape of the one I made, the memorial we held in New York City right before the pandemic, but I've never processed that, never posted it, and there's all sorts of psychological reasons why. But I never would have made the show without Tom's encouragement, without his friendship, without his support, and never would have continued it without his help. Actually, the last email I ever sent him was to let him know that the new episode with Peter Bagg had just gone live. And those of us close to Tom have been dealing with his sudden death these past few years. Like Ed Ward, he died alone in his home. And anyway, the next two speakers talk about Tom and a little of what he meant to them. So after that, I'm going to include a clip from when I recorded with Tom in 2012 after a near-death experience he'd had the year before.
Hey, Gill. This is Frank Santoro. Happy 500th episode. Happy 500th show. Way to go. I'll make it quick. I listened to your chat with Noah Van Sciver and heard you two talking about Tom Spurgeon, and I just wanted to chime in. I think I'm not ready to go to Comic-Con, that Tom's not going to be there, and or to see you there also, like that you won't be there. And I don't want to be at a show where I have to talk about Tom not being there or something like that. And I don't know. Like, I was thinking about how he had something to do with inspiring this show. And I don't know, I think there's something there, promoting culture and sort of being a newspaper columnist at heart. So I don't know. I just think we've all had it a little bit rough, and so spreading the joy of discovery and all those other things. And also I agreed with you that probably it was better that Tom died before the plague, right? So I don't know. I hope you have another great 500 episodes. And I was at the hospital today with my mom, so forgive my stuttering voice. I'm just having a moment, but I hope your health is well and you're doing great, and happy anniversary. See ya.
This is Jonathan Bayless. So, congratulations, Gill, on 500 episodes. I really appreciated that you came out to me during the pandemic to have a great conversation. And for me, it represented a full circle from a conversation I had with your friend Tom Spurgeon. I thought a lot about Tom during this time, and I'm dedicating my next issue of Sew Buttons to him. Thanks for being you and keeping Tom's memory alive as well. You're a good friend. Happy 500.
So here's part of my talk with Tom. It's such a short episode in total, only half an hour. And there's so many things I should have talked to him about. I mean, I was just starting with a podcast, so I didn't really know how to ask anyone questions, and talking to friends is more difficult for me than interviewing friends. More difficult for me than interviewing someone I've never met. But it's of a piece with my great regret about my relationship with Tom, that there's so much more I could have learned about him and from him and how he approached life. The whole pod session, like I say, is really concise, and there's so much in it that he brings to the surface about seeing death and what it taught him, and in the rest of the episode about culture and pop culture and who we are and what we consume, why we consume, and how we can learn to appreciate things better. Tom only had another 7 years of life after this. And like I say, it's my great regret that we didn't just sit down and talk more, even though he was the person I corresponded with more than anyone else. And I talked to him almost every night when as I mentioned a little while ago, when I take Bendico out at night and I hear all the crickets and the insects in their chorus outside. I'll look up at the sky and I will think about Tom and everything he meant to me. And so this show, in a sense, not episode 500, but everything I do is dedicated to the memory and the inspiration that he provided.
Internally, what's gone on, or how's your approach to life changed in the, 20 months or so since this whole episode began?
You know what's weird? When people always say, if you have a scary experience like that and they give you like a certain percentage odds of not making it to the next day, like what goes through your head and everything. The thing I remember is that I had to be driven downstate instead of flown downstate because there was a small child with a scorpion bite in the same evening as I was. So the small child, of course, got the helicopter so they could go to Tucson. So they found an ambulance to drive me to where I was going to the hospital. And so I was morphined up and in the back of an ambulance, looking out the back of an ambulance at a highway for about 3 hours, and not sleeping because I thought, as soon as I would be put under, I might not be getting back up. And what was weird is that you kind of see you get to see it as a beginning, middle, and end. And it never occurred to you that there would be, it doesn't occur to you in that real way. Of course, you know that there's going to be a beginning, middle, and end. But it's like, okay, my story might end in a couple of hours. And what does that mean? Like, what is that life like? And it was something that had been on my mind, because I'm at that age. It's not a surprising thing. Like, grossly overweight man dies of stupid infection and complications from infection at age 42 is not a shocker. It's not something you don't see in the paper. It's not something that would be an amazing thing. So it's a pretty average life. But this is the fact that you kind of, you won't get to talk to certain people again, and you kind of have to trust that those relationships, if that's the ending point, is that going to be okay? And surprisingly, there wasn't a panic. There wasn't any kind of...
Did the morphine help with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that I was massively drugged probably had a lot to do with it. And by the way, morphine is as good as that was my first morphine.
Really?
It was pretty great. But there is this a sense of not even existential pain, not even like the physical calm, but you just kind of it's done. It's going to be that. It's going to be that. That's going to be your life. And it's like, and I was lucky in that I know that some of my friends thought it was horrifying that I was kind of not more distressed, because you certainly have relationships you wanted to be better, and you certainly have, but all you think about is relationships. You don't think about much of anything else. But for the most part, you kind of go, well, I think I did try in a lot of areas, and I think the people that I love know that I love them, and so there was like a real sense of calm that came out of that near-death experience. What happened afterward is that when you recover from something like that, when you have a long recovery, what it actually does is it just takes stuff off the table, and you just have to focus on one thing at a time. And it allows you to not be kind of scattered and unfocused. It's like when you have only 15 minutes to do something, you do what you can in those 15 minutes, and you actually get something done. And personal relationships too. I mean, you just do what you can. You can't get everything at once. You can touch base and talk to people and be involved and care about them, but everything can't be restored at once. And if you can just reach out to someone, or just, that sounds a cliche, and I'm not even sure how to put it. It's kind of like the danger isn't in the limits to what you can do for someone. The danger is withdrawing and realizing you don't have those relationships anymore. And if you can be engaged with someone's life, even if you're just the person that gets to see them twice a year, or you're just the person that gets to touch base once a week, that's what you have, so that's what you work with, if that makes any sense.
Hitchens near the end mentioned if there's somebody you've been putting off getting in touch with, just get in touch with them.
Our final speaker is the cartoonist, artist, and taxidermist Kate LaCour. Kate's another person I never would have met without the podcast, and I'm just awfully happy to have as a friend. She wasn't comfortable recording and sending a message, so we set up a remote recording session instead. We gabbed about all sorts of stuff for 40 minutes or so, but it's been a long time since we connected. In fact, I think it was when Kate was the very first of my COVID check-in guests in March of 2020. So we had a lot to shoot the breeze about. But here's a little bit about number 500.
That was something I've wondered as as I was thinking about, like, Jesus, 500. Even if I got to choose the 500 people I could talk to, I would never survive that. But I realize this is spaced out, of course. But how is your way of talking to people and showing that interest and, like, being present and drawing out? No, not even like drawing out the stories, but how is your way of showing up for someone that you're interested in and getting them to say their interesting self out loud? How's that changed over 500 chances to practice that?
It's something I learned to do. I listened to some of the earlier ones and I kick myself.
No, that's bad.
Say something and I'm just like, oh, you idiot. That's the moment you should have asked them X. And I've become more critical of other interviewers in the same way. But there's a degree that, and I've talked about it, on and off over the years, sitting down with people and talking and not just, getting them to talk, but, interacting with them and really having a conversation. It's something you get better at with reps, I think, but B, it's something you learn to share something. And, it became a skill. I think I always had the schmoozing ability, but, harnessing it for this sort of purpose where it's, really trying to make a connection with someone, learn about them, share enough of yourself that they feel comfortable talking to you. That's something I've cultivated, and something that from the podcast has extended back out into like my professional world where, I've had meetings with people who are supposed to be these stone-faced, incredibly reticent people, and they really open up when we're talking because, I show that I care about what they're saying and, demonstrate an interest. But tell me about, congratulate me and tell me how awesome I am for doing 500. Everybody else.
Yes, 500. You're a madman.
Okay, I promised you one more Clive James segment. This is it. This comes from the end of our conversation. It made me cry, but that's been happening a lot as I've been working on this one. One line I want to quote of yours, but before we close up. Everybody is nuts for your Japanese maple poem. I, in fact, like one that came out about a year earlier, and I have no idea how to pronounce it because I don't speak French, which also brings
Neither do I. I read it avidly, but I don't speak it.
Actually,
Le Son de Ténèbres.
Okay, because that's I thought wonderful and heartbreaking, and you just have the line early on of all of my life, I put my labor first. Any regret?
Well, you're about to meet, you're going to interview my wife.
Right.
You're going to meet the woman who's got a lot to say about that. And she's quite right, of course. I did put my labor first, and I do regret it. And I should have led a more balanced life, but that's easy to say at the end of things. When you're caught up in what you're doing, it's very hard to be reasonable. And art isn't really made out of being reasonable. It's made out of reason, perhaps, but a concentrated version. And it's no and yes. I have regrets, but I got something done. which is very important to me because my mother and father have been robbed, artificially in my view, have been robbed of a life, and I wanted to make up for it. I could go on for a long time. In fact, most of my books are about that.
Did your mother appreciate your success in her lifetime?
She didn't understand it because she wasn't. She left school at 14 and so on, although she was naturally quite smart, but she didn't really know much about literature. But she was pleased to see me get ahead. She was always worried that I never had the qualifications, as she called them, because I was actually a very bad student. And when I finally got a qualifications, she really thought that without qualifications I might starve. And late in my career, the University of Sydney gave me an honorary degree very kindly and asked me to do the address to the assembled graduate students. There were thousands of them, almost all from Asia, I'm pleased to say. And I gave what I thought was an inspiring speech. And there I was in my velvet cap and my red robes, and I proceeded grandly down the aisle towards her, because I had her brought in from the nursing home. She was sitting there in a wheelchair, and she had a light in her eye, and suddenly I knew exactly what that light was. She was thinking, thank God, at last he's got his qualification.
Clive James, thank you so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
I loved it. I hope I can write something else so you'll come again.
Well, if you made it this far, you deserve a medal. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for being part of my big Virtual Memories Show 500th episode. Like I said at the top, I'm already a couple of episodes into the next 500, but no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees about 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever crazy numbers a lot of these guests threw out there, or the number of years they think I have ahead of me. What we have is today. And, well, that's part of why I cited what I cited in the selection from Tom's episode. I'm just glad we got to celebrate like this. So keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.